Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something profoundly, beautifully, and almost ridiculously boring. We're going to build a country, not with flags and anthems, but with mud, wind, and an unbelievable amount of patience. We're heading back in time to the Low Countries, to the Netherlands, long before it was a land of tulips and neat canals. We're going to a place that was barely land at all, a place where, if we were to drop you in for real, you probably wouldn't survive the first day without losing at least one shoe to the insatiable mud. It's a story about fighting the sea, not with swords, but with shovels and sheer, stubborn willpower. If you find that our time here brings you a sense of peace or inspiration, and you'd like us to continue sharing more stories like this, then a simple like or subscribe is the greatest encouragement you could possibly give me. It's like a quiet keep going, letting me know that what I'm doing here is needed by someone, somewhere out there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Feel the ground beneath your feet, or rather, feel the lack of it. It's not solid. It's a squelching, spongy, and deeply unreliable surface, a half-hearted negotiation between earth and water. You are standing in a vast, gray landscape somewhere around the first few centuries A.D. The horizon is a flat, unbroken line, smudged by a persistent mist that clings to everything. The air tastes of salt and damp decay, a mixture of the nearby North Sea and the endless peat bogs that stretch out before you. This is Friesland, or perhaps the delta of the Rhine and the Meuse. The names don't matter much to you. What matters is the water. It's everywhere. To one side, the restless, gray churn of the sea, an ever-present threat that whispers of storm surges and floods. To the other, a labyrinth of sluggish rivers, meandering streams, and vast, shallow lakes. The land itself is a soaked sponge. This is the core historical truth of this place. A significant portion of what would one day become the Netherlands lies below the level of the sea. It's a geographical predicament that feels less like a fact and more like a cosmic joke. You live in a bowl that the ocean is constantly trying to fill.
You shift your weight, and your leather-wrapped foot sinks another inch into the dark, peaty soil. The sound is a wet, defeated sigh. Lifting your leg requires a surprising amount of effort, a constant battle against the suction of the mud. Your daily life is dictated by the tides. High tide forces you and your small community onto the few slightly higher natural ridges of clay or sand. Low tide reveals a glistening, treacherous world of mudflats, rich with shellfish and worms, if you're brave enough to venture out. Here's a strange little detail of your world. Not all the land is even attached to the bottom. There are floating islands of peat, known as driftillen. These are tangled mats of vegetation and soil that have broken away and now drift aimlessly in the larger lakes. Sometimes, from a distance, they look like solid ground, a tempting refuge. But if you were to step onto one, you'd feel it bob and sway beneath you, a profoundly unnerving sensation, like the world itself has lost its moorings. You've learned to tell the difference, to read the landscape, to know which patch of green is trustworthy and which is a lie. The fundamental question, one that historians and archaeologists still debate in the quiet halls of universities, is why you are here at all. Were your ancestors, the first Frisians or Batavians, pushed into this marginal, waterlogged world by more powerful tribes from the east? Was this the only land available? Or were you pulled here, attracted by the unique resources, The peat provides endless fuel for fires. The wetlands are teeming with waterfowl, the water's full of fish. Perhaps this challenging environment wasn't a last resort, but a deliberate choice. A place where no large army could easily maneuver. A land that would protect those who understood its secrets. The truth is likely a muddle of both, a story as murky as the water pooling around your ankles. For now, you don't think about grand historical forces. You think about the wind, a constant, nagging presence that sweeps across the flat expanse with nothing to stop it. It chills you to the bone, even through your woolen cloak. You think about the next storm, the next unusually high tide. You look at the small cluster of huts where your family lives, perilously close to the lapping water. Every day is a gamble. Every storm is a potential catastrophe. You know with a certainty that settles deep in your gut that you cannot keep living with the water like this. You have to find a way to live above it. The ground won't rise on its own, so you will have to raise it yourself.
The idea isn't a flash of genius. It's not a moment of divine inspiration. It's a slow, dawning realization, born from damp feet and the perpetual fear of losing your food stores to a sudden flood. If the land won't rise for you, you will have to raise the land yourself. You begin small. The goal isn't to build a mountain, just to keep your bedding dry. You start with the floor of your simple one-room hut, a structure of wattle and daub with a thatched roof. You dig clay from a nearby deposit, a heavy, sticky, blue-gray substance that clings to your shovel and your hands. You pack it into a wicker basket, your knuckles white from the strain, and carry it, load by heavy load, back to your home. You dump the clay inside, spreading it and tamping it down with your feet, a rhythmic, stomping dance. Thud, thud, thud. It's back-breaking, monotonous work. With every basket, the floor rises by an imperceptible fraction of an inch. Your family works alongside you. Even the children help, carrying smaller lumps of clay or bundles of sod. After days of this, the floor is noticeably higher. For the first time, during a normal high tide, the water seeps around the outside of your hut, but not inside. It's a small, triumphant victory. But you know it's not enough. A real storm will wash it all away. So you build a low mound, a platform just big enough for your home. This artificial hill has a name. In this part of the world, they call it a terp, or sometimes a weird. This is the mainstream historical fact of your existence. You are a terp dweller. Your entire world, your island of safety, is something you and your ancestors built by hand. And then comes the strangest ingredient of all, the secret to a long-lasting terp. It's not just clay and sod, it's refuse. Everything you don't need goes into the layers of the mound. You mix in broken pottery, shells from your meals, ash from your hearth, and most importantly, manure. The waste from your animals, the sheep and cattle that are your most valuable possessions, is an essential building material. You layer it in with the clay and turf. It sounds disgusting, and the smell on a warm day is something you learn to ignore, but it serves a vital purpose. The organic material helps bind the soil together, and as it slowly compacts and decomposes, it creates a remarkably stable, solid mass. This is where a quiet, academic debate flickers. Modern archaeologists, excavating these ancient mounds, have found distinct, stratified layers of dung and waste. They can't quite agree on the primary purpose of these layers. Were your ancestors, in their practical, earthy wisdom, deliberately using manure as a form of primitive bioengineering, knowing it would create a strong, cohesive structure? Or were they simply living on top of their own garbage dump because it was the most convenient way to get rid of it? and the structural integrity was just a happy accident. You don't think about it in those terms. You just know that it works. You know that adding the stable sweepings makes the mound stronger. Over time, the process becomes communal. Your neighbors are doing the same. Your small family platform joins with theirs. The turp grows, not just in height, but in width. Generations are measured by the layers of the mound. An archaeologist millennia from now will be able to read your village's history in these strata. A layer of ash might indicate a great fire. A thick deposit of clay could mark a generation's concerted effort after a catastrophic flood. Eventually, the turp is no longer just a platform for a house, but a small village in itself. A cluster of farmhouses huddles together on the summit, their thatched roofs packed tightly against the wind. A freshwater pond, dug in the center, collects precious rainwater. Your livestock often shares the turp with you. The animals brought up to the safety of the high ground during storms, their warmth and smell a constant presence in your life. You live in incredibly close quarters with your community, a forced intimacy that builds strong bonds and, inevitably, petty squabbles. From the top of your man-made hill, you can look out across the vast, flat landscape and see other turpin on the horizon, each one a tiny island of human existence, crowned with a plume of smoke from its hearths. You are safe, but you are also isolated. Each storm, each high tide turns your village into a true island, cut off from your neighbors by a temporary sea. The solution has created a new problem. You are above the water, yes, but you are not yet its master.
The isolation is a quiet, creeping problem. In good weather, it's an inconvenience. At low tide, you can trudge across the mud flats to the next turp to trade goods, arrange a marriage, or simply share news. It's a messy, time-consuming journey, your path dictated by the firmer patches of ground you know by heart. But when a storm rolls in, or during the seasons of unusually high water, that journey becomes impossible. Your world shrinks to the circumference of your man-made hill. A sick neighbor on the next turp is as unreachable as if they were on the moon. A vital tool that breaks cannot be replaced. You realize, as a community, that being above the water isn't the final answer. You need to connect. You need to create permanence in this impermanent landscape. The idea starts simply: a raised path, a low, narrow ridge of earth connecting your turp to the one a mile away. You begin the work, again with the same tools: a simple shovel, a wicker basket, and your own physical strength. You dig up sod and clay from the areas alongside your proposed path, piling it up to form a causeway just wide enough for two people to pass. It's a start, but the first significant flood washes parts of it away, leaving treacherous gaps. This is when the concept of a dike or a levee begins to evolve. It's a subtle but crucial shift in thinking. You're not just building a path to walk on, you're building a wall to hold back the water. The primary purpose changes from connection to protection. The work becomes more organized, more communal. It has to be. One family building a small section of dike is useless. The entire community, and even the neighboring communities, must work together. You stand in a long line of people, passing baskets of heavy clay from hand to hand, a human conveyor belt. The rhythm is slow and steady, a chain of shared effort. The men dig, the women and older children carry. The air is filled with the grunts of exertion and the soft, repetitive thud of clay being dumped and tamped down. You build your dikes low at first, maybe just 3 or 4 feet high. They follow the natural contours of the higher ground, connecting one turp to another, and then looping around a small patch of pasture land that you hope to keep dry for your cattle.
This is a key historical moment, the birth of the Dutch waterboards, or waterschappen.
As soon as you build a dike that protects land belonging to multiple families, you need rules. Who is responsible for maintaining which section? How do you ensure your neighbor does his share of the work, so his neglect doesn't flood everyone? This is where historians see the deep-rooted origins of the famous Dutch polder model, a culture of consultation, compromise, and collective responsibility. The alternative is disaster for everyone. So you gather, you argue, you agree, you establish a system. A man is appointed, a dijkgraaf or dijkreeve, to oversee the maintenance and enforce the rules. It's a position of immense local power, not bestowed by a king, but created out of sheer practical necessity. Here's a peculiar little-known fact about these early dikes. They were often built with a core of seaweed. You'd gather vast quantities of eelgrass and other seaweed from the tidal flats, letting it dry slightly before packing it tightly into the center of your earthen wall. The salt-impregnated seaweed was remarkably resistant to rot, and its dense, fibrous structure created a strong, surprisingly water-resistant core. From the outside, it just looked like an earth wall, but its hidden skeleton was a gift from the very sea you were trying to fight. The effectiveness of these early dikes is, naturally, a subject of some academic debate. Some scholars argue that these low, meandering dikes were primarily territorial markers and causeways, and their protective function was secondary and often ineffective against serious storm surges. Others maintain that this was the crucial first step in a long technological evolution, a deliberate and successful attempt to start reclaiming land from the water, however modestly. Looking at the low ridge of earth you've just helped build, you don't care about the academic labels. You see a dry path to your neighbor's turp. You see a slightly safer field for your cows. It's not perfect. It's a fragile line drawn in the mud, but for the first time, you haven't just risen above the water, you've pushed it back. You've drawn a boundary, and in doing so, you have accidentally created an entirely new problem that you are only just beginning to understand.
For a while, it feels like you've won. The sun comes out, and the new dike stands proud, a dark, earthen scar on the pale green landscape. It works. The daily high tides lap against its outer face and then retreat, defeated. The land inside, your precious pasture, stays dry. A feeling of profound security settles over the community. You have tamed a small piece of the world. You have looked the North Sea in the eye and told it, not here. This part is ours. You allow yourself a moment of quiet pride as you watch your cattle graze peacefully on land that just last season would have been a saltwater marsh. Then, the rain starts. It's not a violent storm, but a persistent drizzly rain that is characteristic of this part of the world. It drums softly on the thatched roof of your hut for days. At first, no one is concerned. Rain is normal. But then you notice something strange. The puddles in the pasture are not shrinking between showers. They are growing. The ditches you dug are full to the brim, their water still and stagnant. The ground, which had been firming up nicely, is reverting to its old, spongy self. You walk to the center of your newly enclosed land, and the truth dawns on you with a cold, sinking feeling. The dike is a wall. It is exceptionally good at keeping the water from the sea out, but it is equally, catastrophically good at keeping the water from the sky in. You have not built a fortress, you have built a bowl. Every drop of rain that falls on this land is now trapped, with nowhere to go. Congratulations, you've successfully invented the bathtub, a very, very large bathtub with no drain. This is the central unyielding problem of a polder, the mainstream historical fact that will dominate Dutch engineering for the next 1,000 years. Reclaimed land is below the surrounding water level, meaning it cannot drain naturally. And it's not just the rain. You notice dark, damp patches appearing at the base of the dike on the inside, even on dry days. It's as if the dike itself is weeping. This is kwel, or seepage.
The immense pressure of the water on the outside is forcing it to find a path through the porous soil underneath the dike, bubbling up from below. The water is attacking you not just from the sky, but insidiously, silently, from the very earth beneath your feet.
Your pasture is becoming a swamp. The grass is yellowing, the ground is waterlogged, and your cattle are huddled on the highest, driest patches, looking miserable. The community is gripped by a quiet panic. Your grand solution has created a problem that might be even worse than the original. At least the sea floods came and went. This is a slow, permanent drowning. Once again, you gather, you argue, you despair. And then someone, a clever farmer, a boat builder who understands how water behaves, proposes an idea. You need a gate, a door in the dike. It must be a special kind of door, one that only opens one way. You set to work, digging a channel through the dike you so laboriously built. You line it with timber to stop it from collapsing. At the sea end of this channel, you build a simple but ingenious device, a wooden flap or sluice gate, sluice. It's hinged at the top. When the tide on the outside is low, the pressure from the trapped water on the inside will push the gate open, allowing your swamp to drain into the sea. When the tide rises, the sea itself will push the gate firmly shut, sealing the polder once more. The effectiveness and sophistication of these very first tidal sluices are an ongoing debate among historians. Some believe they were incredibly simple, unreliable flap gates that often got stuck open with debris or failed to close properly, leading to frequent minor floods. Others argue that, drawing on Roman engineering knowledge that may have lingered in the region, they were more robust structures, with manually operated winches in frames, giving you more control. You don't have the luxury of that debate. You just build the best you can with the wood and tools you have. You stand and watch as the tide goes out. For a long, tense moment, nothing happens. Then, with a groan of wet wood, the gate swings open. A torrent of brown, stagnant water rushes out of your polder and into the receding sea. A collective sigh of relief ripples through the onlookers. It works. The system is flawed, delicate, and requires constant maintenance, but it works. You are no longer master of your land, not truly. You are a servant to the tides, a slave to the rhythm of the moon, constantly watching, waiting for that precious window of low water to release the pressure building within your walls. It's a temporary solution, a high-stakes balancing act, and you know, deep down, that it won't be enough forever. You need a power that doesn't rely on the sea's permission. Years pass. Generations live and die by the rhythm of the sluice gate. Your community becomes expert at water management. You learn to read the weather, to anticipate the tides, to dredge the channels and maintain the gates. The system works, but it is limiting. You can only drain your land when the sea level is lower than your polder, which, during long periods of rain or unfavorable winds, might not happen for days on end. The land remains damp, suitable for pasture, but not for the lucrative grain crops your neighbors on higher, natural ground are growing. You are stuck in a state of arrested development, forever at the mercy of gravity. Then one day, a traveler brings a story, a wild, improbable tale from a distant land. He speaks of a machine, a giant of wood and canvas that can turn the wind into work. He calls it a mill. You've seen small hand-cranked mills for grinding grain, of course, but this is something else entirely. This machine, he says, can lift water. You listen, intrigued, but skeptical. To lift water goes against nature, against everything you know. Water flows down. That is its law. To make it go up seems like a kind of magic. The idea, however, plants a seed. The wind is the one resource you have in endless, overwhelming abundance. It is a constant, powerful force that sweeps across your flat land, a force you have always endured. What if you could harness it? What if, instead of fighting the wind, you could make it your ally? You are not the inventor of the windmill. This is a crucial historical point. The concept has been drifting around Europe for some time, likely originating in the Middle East centuries earlier. But here, in the Low Countries, this existing technology is about to find its ultimate purpose. It's not just a clever gadget. It's the key to your survival and prosperity. The Dutch didn't invent the windmill, but they perfected it and bent it to a singular nation-building task: draining land. Your first glimpse of one is a strange, almost unsettling sight. You are visiting a neighboring region, one slightly more technologically advanced. On the horizon, where you expect to see nothing but the flat line of the Earth, there's a new silhouette. It's a tall, tapered structure, but it has arms. 4 enormous, canvas-clad arms that are turning, slowly and majestically, in the steady breeze. It is unlike anything you have ever seen. It looks less like a building and more like a living creature, a gentle giant patiently waving at the sky. You approach it with a sense of awe. The air around it is filled with a soft, rhythmic creaking and groaning. It's the sound of wood working against wood, of immense forces being tamed. The whole tower seems to hum with a quiet power. This was the poldermolen, the polder mill. Its job is not to grind wheat or saw wood. Its sole purpose is to lift water from a low place to a high place, tirelessly for as long as the wind blows. This is where you encounter a small but fascinating historical detail: the specific design of this machine. It's a hollow post mill. The entire top section of the mill, the cap, the sails, the main gears, is balanced on a single, massive, upright wooden post. This allows the miller to turn the entire head of the mill to face the wind, no matter which direction it's coming from. It's a brilliant piece of engineering, but from the outside it looks precarious, as if the whole heavy structure could topple over at any moment. Historians and engineers still marvel at the intuitive genius of these early millwrights. How did they, without formal training in physics or engineering, figure out the precise angles for the sails to best catch the wind, the complex gear ratios needed to translate the spinning motion of the sails into the slow, powerful lift of the water? Was it purely trial and error, a process of countless failures and incremental improvements passed down through guilds? Or was there a more systematic, almost scientific approach at play, a form of folk engineering that we no longer fully appreciate? The records are sparse, leaving a tantalizing gap in our knowledge. You stand at the base of this giant, feeling the ground vibrate slightly with its work. You watch the huge sails sweep past, each one bigger than a fishing boat, their canvas sails taut in the wind. You see the water gushing out of a channel at the base of the mill, flowing into a higher canal that will carry it to the sea. It is defying gravity. It is doing the impossible. You look at this machine, this magnificent collaboration of wood, canvas, and wind, and you don't see magic anymore. You see the future. You see a tool that can finally give you the upper hand in your eternal struggle with the water. You see a way to make your own luck, to create dry land, not by the grace of the tides, but by the power of the sky. Intrigued, you venture closer, your apprehension slowly giving way to a mechanic's curiosity. The miller, a man whose face is a roadmap of wind-etched lines, sees your interest and beckons you inside the base of the mill. You have to stoop to enter the low doorway, and the moment you are inside, the sounds become more intense. It's a symphony of wood, a deep, resonant groaning from the massive central post, a rhythmic, percussive clacking of gears, and the constant, gentle rushing sound of water. The air is thick with the smell of damp wood, oil, and the faint, dusty scent of the grain that is sometimes milled here on the side. The miller points downwards, and your eyes adjust to the gloom. There, half submerged in a churning, dark channel of water, is the heart of the machine. It's not a complex mess of pistons and valves. It is something beautifully, brutally simple. A giant wheel, tilted at an angle, with wooden blades or scoops fixed around its circumference. This is the scoop wheel, or scheprad. It is the most common method of water lifting in these early mills, a foundational piece of Dutch technology. You watch, mesmerized by its motion. The great wheel turns with a slow, relentless rhythm, driven by the colossal gears above your head. As each blade dips into the low-lying water of the polder ditch, it scoops up a sizable chunk of water. The wheel continues its rotation, lifting that captive water upward. The genius of the design is in its simplicity. It's not a delicate pump, it's a brute force water mover. As the blade reaches the highest point of its arc, gravity takes over, and the water simply spills out into a stone-lined trough set at a higher level. From there, it flows away, into the main drainage canal outside the polder. Each scoop doesn't seem to lift much water, perhaps the volume of a few large buckets. But the wheel never stops. Scoop after scoop, minute after minute, hour after hour, a steady stream of water is lifted from your world and deposited into the one outside. It's the triumph of persistence over volume. The miller shouts over the noise, explaining that this single wheel can move thousands of gallons of water in an hour.
Here, you learn a strange and specific piece of vocabulary that separates the insiders from the outsiders. The difference between the water level inside the polder and the water level in the canal outside is called the opvoerhoogte, or the lift height. This is the crucial number that defines a mill's job. A typical scoop wheel mill, the miller explains, can only handle a lift height of about 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters at most, about 5 or 6 feet. If you need to lift the water higher than that, the scoop wheel becomes incredibly inefficient. The water starts to spill back out of the scoops before it reaches the top. This limitation is a source of quiet disagreement among historical engineers. Was the scoop wheel's limited lift height a significant technological bottleneck that slowed the pace of land reclamation for decades? Or was it a perfectly adequate solution for the shallow polders of the time, a case of technology being perfectly matched to the immediate need? Some argue that the Dutch clung to the simple, reliable scoop wheel for too long, while others praise its robustness and ease of repair, which were more important factors than raw efficiency in this remote and challenging environment. You, watching the water pour out in a steady, reassuring stream, are simply impressed that it works at all. You put your hand in the stream of lifted water. It's cold and murky, full of silt and bits of weed. It is the lifeblood of the polder being drained away, the very substance that made the land a swamp. You look back at the deceptively simple wheel, turning with its gentle, wave-like rhythm. The scoops rise and fall, a slow, mechanical breathing. This machine isn't just a collection of wood and gears. It's a lung expelling the water that would otherwise drown the land. It's a tireless heart, pumping the polder dry. You understand now that the windmill isn't just a building. It's an extension of the land itself, a prosthetic organ designed to correct a fundamental flaw in its nature. And you know with absolute certainty that you must have one for your own community.
The decision is made. Your community pools its resources, a daunting collection of guilders, livestock, and promises of labor. You hire a master millwright, a man with a near mythical reputation who travels from town to town, his mind filled with the complex geometry of gears and sails. But before he can even begin his work on the mill, there is a more fundamental task to be accomplished. You cannot simply place a windmill in a swamp and hope for the best. First, you must define the battlefield. You must draw a line in the water. This is the beginning of the most ambitious earth-moving project you have ever undertaken, the construction of the ringdijk, the ringdijk. This isn't like the low, meandering dikes that connected your terpen. This is a serious piece of civil engineering, a massive, unbroken earthen wall that will encircle the entire area you intend to drain.
It is the fortress wall that will hold back the surrounding sea or lake, while your new mechanical giant does its work inside. The millwrights and the dike grieves pace out the line. They use long ropes and wooden stakes to mark the intended path of the dike. It feels like a sacred act, like you are carving out a piece of the world for yourselves, claiming it from the chaos of the water. The line is drawn. Now the real work begins. It is a colossal undertaking, powered entirely by human and animal muscle. A long, shallow canal is dug along the outside of the staked line. This canal, the ring-fart or ring canal, will serve two purposes. First, the earth dug out to create it will be used to build the dike itself. Second, it will be the receptacle for all the water your windmill will eventually pump out. It's a beautifully efficient, self-contained system. You are back in the mud, part of a vast, coordinated effort. Then with shovels stand waist-deep in the murky water of the nascent canal, flinging dripping shovelfuls of clay and peat up onto the bank. It's heavy, wet, and exhausting. You work in teams, some digging, others using wheelbarrows, a relatively new and celebrated technology in your area, to move the earth into position. The air is thick with the smell of churned mud and the shouts of foremen.
The construction of the dike is a slow, layered process, a kind of terrestrial geology in fast motion. A base of heavy clay is laid down first to create a waterproof foundation. Then comes layer upon layer of soil and sod. You learn to pack it down, to angle the sides just right to prevent slumping. It's not just a pile of dirt, it's a carefully engineered structure. Here you encounter a fascinating and somewhat gruesome historical tidbit. To strengthen the dike, especially in weak spots, a technique called dike grounding, or involving a dike body, was sometimes used, though its frequency is debated. This involved using animal carcasses, a dead cow, a horse, or several sheep, as part of the dike's internal structure. The idea, as grim as it sounds, was that the bones would provide a kind of primitive reinforcement, a skeletal anchor within the earth. As you work, you see a dead farm animal being dragged towards a section of the dike, and you try not to think about it too much. It's just another resource, another part of the world being repurposed for this single, all-consuming goal. The historical debate around this practice is a quiet one. Some historians believe it was a common, pragmatic solution in an era before modern materials. Others argue it was a rare, last-ditch measure, or perhaps even a folk practice rooted more in superstition than sound engineering. The evidence is scant, often based on local legends or the occasional, unsettling archaeological find. The dike grows slowly, foot by foot. It rises from the water, a massive, sloping wall of earth, higher and wider than anything you have ever built before. It's a statement of intent, a declaration of war against the water. As you stand on its growing summit, you can look one way and see the wild, untamed water of the lake you are about to conquer. You look the other way and see the placid, grid-like landscape of an older, established polder. You are on the frontier, the very edge of human dominion over nature. Weeks turn into months. The ring is finally closed. The last gap is filled. A great cheer goes up from the exhausted workers. You have created a perimeter. You have isolated your enemy. Inside this great earthen circle lies a captured lake, a body of water that is now cut off from its source, waiting for its sentence. The stage is set. The water is trapped. Now it is time to bring in the executioner. Your brand new, patiently waiting windmill.
The single windmill, as magnificent as it is, stands ready on the edge of your newly encircled lake. The millwright has finished his work. The sails are covered in fresh canvas, and the great scoop wheel is poised over the water inside the ring dike. The day comes to begin. The brake is released, the sails catch the wind, and with a groan, the giant begins its slow, rhythmic work. Water begins to pour into the ring canal. It's a moment of triumph. But as days turn into weeks, a new reality sets in. The water level inside your polder is dropping, but it is doing so with agonizing slowness. The lake you have enclosed is vast and deep, deeper than the 1.5-meter lift height your single mill can handle. As the water level inside sinks, the distance it needs to be lifted to reach the ring canal increases. Soon, you reach the physical limit of your scoop wheel. The mill keeps turning, the wheel keeps scooping, but it's just lifting water up and spilling it right back into the polder. You have stalled. The project is a failure. The community is on the verge of despair. All that work, all that expense for nothing. But the millwright, a man accustomed to solving impossible problems, is not defeated. He gathers the leaders of the water board and explains the solution. It is an idea of such breathtaking simplicity and ambition that it sounds like madness. If one mill cannot lift the water high enough, he says, then you will use more than one. You will make them work together. This is the birth of the Mollengong, the gang of mills. It is perhaps the most iconic and ingenious concept in the entire history of Dutch land reclamation. You don't just build more mills randomly, you arrange them in a coordinated, sequential line. You are about to build a staircase for water. The plan is this. The first mill, the lowest one, will stand at the edge of the lake, just as you planned. It will lift the water the maximum height it can, about 1.5 meters, and deposit it not into the final ring canal, but into a temporary, intermediate basin or channel. At the edge of this first basin, you will build a second windmill. The second mill's job is to lift the water from this intermediate level up another 1.5 meters into a second, even higher basin. And then, if needed, a third mill will lift it from there into the final ring canal, which can then drain out to the sea. It's a relay race for water, with each mill passing the baton to the next.
The sheer audacity of it is staggering. It means building not 1, but 3, 4, or even more windmills, all perfectly spaced and engineered to work in concert. It means an exponential increase in cost and labor. But it is the only way. So you go back to work. You watch as the other mills are constructed, rising up along the dike like a row of sentinels. A whole new layer of infrastructure is required. The intermediate storage basins, carefully dug and lined to prevent leakage. It's a complex, multi-level water-moving factory, powered entirely by the wind. A strange and delightful detail emerges from this era, the language of sales. A miller couldn't just shout instructions to the other millers a mile away, so they developed a sophisticated code using the positions of the sails, the way the sails were stopped, in a perfect cross, or an X shape, or with one sail just past the highest point, conveyed messages. One position might mean stopping for a short break. Another meant, long break, come over for a coffee. A joyful position, with the sails stopped just before the vertical, could announce a birth or a wedding in the miller's family. A sad position, just after the vertical, announced a death. It was a silent, public bulletin board, readable for miles around, a language written on the sky. The exact origins of this sail language are, of course, debated by historians. Was it a formal, standardized system developed by the Millers' Guilds, or an informal, regional dialect that evolved organically? The evidence suggests a bit of both, with certain signals being universal, while others were unique to a specific polder. Finally, the day of the real test arrives. All the mills in the gang are ready. One by one, their brakes are released.
The lowest mill starts, lifting the water to the first basin. As that basin fills, the second miller engages his machine and it begins to lift the water to the next level, then the third. You stand on the dike and watch this incredible, coordinated effort. It's a mechanical cascade, a perfectly synchronized team of giants, all working together to achieve what one alone could not. Water is steadily, powerfully climbing the staircase you have built for it and pouring into the ring canal. The level of the lake is dropping again, faster this time. You are no longer stalled. You have broken through the barrier. You are witnessing a system that can, in theory, drain any lake, no matter how deep.
The gang of mills works relentlessly, their sails spinning in a near constant dialogue with the wind. The soundscape of your world is now dominated by their rhythmic creaking, a reassuring chorus of progress. Day by day, week by week, the impossible happens. The surface of the captured lake shrinks. At first, it's a subtle change, a slightly wider band of mud appearing at the edges. But then, the retreat accelerates. You watch from the top of the ring dike as new features emerge from the receding water like ghosts. The tops of long drowned trees appear, their bare branches reaching for a sky they haven't seen in centuries. The ghostly outline of an old submerged creek bed reveals itself, a faint depression in the nascent landscape. It's like watching the memory of the land return. The process is hypnotic. The water level drops and the land rises to meet you. It's a slow, deliberate revelation. The sheer scale of what you are accomplishing begins to dawn on you. You are not just clearing a field, you are creating an entire landscape from scratch. A vast, flat expanse, larger than you can comprehend, is being born before your very eyes.
As the last large pools of water are siphoned away by the tireless mills, what's left is not a pristine grassy field. It is a staggering panorama of mud. A vast, glistening gray-brown plain stretches to the horizon. It is perfectly, unnervingly flat. The air is thick with a primal organic smell, the smell of centuries of accumulated sediment, of decaying aquatic life, of the raw, exposed bottom of the lake. It's the smell of primordial ooze, the scent of creation itself. The ground is a treacherous, semi-liquid soup. It's a combination of clay, silt, and peat, saturated with water. For now, it is utterly impassable. You wouldn't be able to walk 10 feet without sinking to your knees. The old hands, the experienced polder makers, tell you to be patient. The land needs to ripen, they say. It needs to breathe. It needs time for the wind and sun to begin their work, to start wicking away the surface moisture and creating a fragile crust. Herein lies a little-known technical aspect of the process, the role of chemistry in ripening the soil. The newly exposed lakebed is often anaerobic, lacking oxygen, and can contain chemical compounds like iron sulfides. When these are exposed to the air, they oxidize. This chemical reaction is crucial. It helps the fine clay particles to clump together, a process called flocculation. This changes the structure of the soil from a dense, impermeable sludge into a more granular, permeable medium that can actually support roots. It's a slow, invisible process, a form of geological alchemy.
Historians and soil scientists still discuss the extent to which your ancestors understood this complex chemistry. Did they know about oxidation and flocculation? Almost certainly not in those terms, but did they know from generations of experience that newly drained soil needed to be exposed to the air for a certain period before it became fertile? Absolutely. They called it sweetening the land. They might have attributed it to the wind chasing away evil spirits from the water, but their practical methods were scientifically sound. a testament to the power of empirical observation. You watch as the first birds arrive, landing tentatively on the firmer patches of mud. They are waders, feasting on the bounty of worms and mollusks suddenly exposed to the sky. They are the first pioneers in this new world, their thin legs leaving delicate tracks on the virgin soil. The surface of the mud begins to change. Under the sun, it cracks into vast polygonal patterns, like the shell of a giant tortoise. The initial dark, wet sheen gives way to a lighter, dusty grey. It's still too soft to walk on in most places, but a crust is forming, a promise of solidity. You stand on the dike, the wind whipping at your clothes, and you look out over your creation. It is a blank slate, an empty canvas of immense proportions. It feels both triumphant and deeply intimidating. You have done the impossible. You have emptied the sea. Now comes the even harder part, turning this vast, empty, muddy wasteland into a place where people can live, work, and thrive. The battle against the water is won for now. The battle with the earth is just beginning.
The day finally comes when the foreman declares the ground firm enough for a first inspection. It's a milestone, a moment of transition from a water project to a land project. You, along with a small group of officials and workers, prepare for the first steps onto the new territory. But you don't just put on your regular shoes. You are issued with special equipment, klumpen, the iconic wooden clogs, but with a modification. They are attached to wide wooden boards like primitive snowshoes. These are your mud pattens, or slakesladen. Wearing these clumsy contraptions, you carefully lower yourself from the dike onto the new ground. Your first step is tentative. The board sinks slightly, distributing your weight over a larger area. The ground beneath feels like a firm jelly. It holds your weight, but it quivers slightly with every movement. It's a profoundly strange sensation walking on land that was, just a few months ago, the bottom of a lake. Each step is a conscious effort, lifting the wide, mud-caked boards and placing them carefully. The sound is a wet, sticky slap, followed by a powerful sucking sound as you lift your foot for the next step. Slap, shloop, slap, shloop. This is the very definition of a mainstream polder experience, that first awkward walk across the virgin soil. You feel like a fly walking on pudding. The landscape is alien. It is vast, flat, and empty, stretching away in every direction. The only features are the subtle rises and falls of the former lake bed, invisible from the dike, but noticeable now that you are on them. You can see the faint, meandering lines of old underwater channels and the slightly higher ridges of ancient sandbars.
As you walk, your eyes are drawn to the ground, and you see something fascinating. The mud is littered with the detritus of the drowned world. You see the perfectly preserved skeletons of fish, their fine bones laid out on the clay. You find thick beds of seashells from species that haven't lived in the area since it was cut off from the sea. It's a treasure trove for the historically inclined. Occasionally, someone finds something more significant, a piece of a sunken boat, a stone tool from a prehistoric settlement that once stood on the lake's shore, or, in one celebrated case in a different polder, the complete skeleton of a mammoth. Your new land is also an open-air museum. Here's a strange detail you have to contend with: the smell. It's not just the damp, organic smell you noticed before. As the sun bakes the surface, new scents are released. There's a strong sulfurous odor in some places, like rotten eggs, from the ongoing chemical reactions in the soil. In other areas where thick layers of peat are exposed, there's a rich, earthy, almost smoky smell. Your new country doesn't have a single smell. It has a whole geography of them, some pleasant, some deeply unpleasant. The exact composition of the soil you're walking on is a topic of intense interest, not just for you, but for future geologists. The process of creating a polder is a giant, unintentional soil sorting experiment. The heavier sand particles would have settled in certain areas of the former lake, while the lighter clay and silt would have drifted to others. This creates a patchwork of different soil types across the polder floor. Mapping this soil map is a crucial task. The sandy soils will be good for certain crops, while the rich clay will be better for others. Your future prosperity depends on understanding this invisible, underground geography. And so, experts walk with you, taking samples, poking the ground with augers, and making meticulous notes. It's a slow, deliberate process of getting to know your new, muddy infant of a country.
You make your way to the center of the polder. The windmills on the distant dike look small, like toys. The silence is profound, broken only by the wind and the squelching of your mud pattens. There's a feeling of immense, intimidating possibility. This blank canvas is yours to paint, but it's also a heavy responsibility. The shape you give this land, the canals you dig, the roads you build, the farms you lay out, will likely last for centuries. You are not just planning a farm, you are setting the course of a small piece of history. You feel the weight of that responsibility settle on your shoulders, as heavy as the mud clinging to your feet.
The new land is a paradox. It is solid enough to walk on, but too fragile and waterlogged to farm. It is yours, but it is not yet useful. The slow process of ripening has begun, but relying on sun and wind alone could take years. You don't have years. The investors who funded the mills are impatient, and your community needs a return on its colossal investment of labor and capital. You need to accelerate the process. You need a living machine to finish the job the windmills started. The solution, proposed by the polder masters, seems utterly backward at first. You are going to plant something, but you are not going to plant valuable wheat or barley or even turnips. You are going to plant common reeds, reet. To an outsider, this would look like madness. Why would you take a pristine, blank slate of new earth and deliberately cover it with a plant that is essentially a weed? A plant that you will have to later painstakingly remove. It feels like taking a step backward. But you are learning that in the world of polders, the most direct path is rarely the correct one. So the work begins again. You wade back out into the gooey, half-dry landscape. The mud patterns are gone, replaced by high boots that are constantly threatening to be swallowed by the sludge. Instead of shovels, you carry sacks filled with rhizomes, the thick, tangled root-like stems of the reed plant. You don't sow seeds, you plant these tough, stringy cuttings. You press them into the mud with your foot or a long stick, spacing them out in a rough grid. It is cold, wet, exhausting work, your back aching from bending over all day.
And then you wait, but not for long. The reeds take to the new, nutrient-rich soil with an explosive vitality. Within a few weeks, a faint green haze covers the vast gray expanse. A month later, that haze has become a sea of green spears shooting up towards the sky. By the end of the first growing season, the transformation is total. Your empty, flat polder has become a dense, impenetrable jungle of reeds, towering over your head. The soundscape changes completely. The profound silence of the empty mudflats is replaced by a constant, soft, rustling whisper. When the wind blows, which is almost always, the sound is like a continuous sigh, a dry, papery shushing that fills the air. It's the sound of the land breathing. This is the mainstream historical purpose of this first planting. The reeds are a biological engine designed to do two things. First, their incredibly dense and fibrous root systems, the rhizomes, spread like a vast underground net, physically binding the loose particles of clay and silt together. They are giving your new land a skeleton. Second,
Each of the millions of reed stalks acts like a tiny straw, drawing moisture from the soil and releasing it into the air through transpiration. They are, in effect, millions of microscopic pumps working day and night to drink the polder dry from the inside out.
Naturally, historians have a quiet but persistent debate about the primary motivation for this reed planting. Was it purely a brilliant, if laborious, feat of ecological engineering, a necessary step to stabilize the soil for future agriculture? Or was it, as some argue, a shrewd economic move? Reed was the primary material for thatching roofs in this period. A vast, high-quality crop of thatch could be harvested and sold, providing the polder's investors with their first, much-needed cash flow. This would make the entire enterprise profitable years before the first bushel of grain could be harvested. Knowing the famously pragmatic Dutch mindset, the truth is likely that it was both, a perfect solution that solved an engineering problem and an economic one simultaneously. Why fix one leak when you can also sell the bucket? As the reeds dry out in the autumn, you become aware of a new danger. You have spent generations fearing water. Now, for the first time, you learn to fear fire. This immense continuous sea of dry reeds is a tinderbox. A single spark from a pipe, a stray lightning strike, could set the entire polder ablaze in a terrifying, unstoppable firestorm. The very plant that saved your land could now utterly destroy it. You have traded one elemental threat for another. But the risk is worth it. After a season or two, the job is done. The ground beneath the reeds is remarkably firm, dry, and stable. The reeds have given their life to heal the soil, and now their final act is to be destroyed. You and the other workers move in with long scythes or controlled fires, clearing the land. The rustling sound is replaced by the crackle of flames with a swish of blades. A layer of enriching ash is left behind. The reed forest is gone. In its place is dark, rich, and finally, truly promising earth. The canvas is blank once more, but this time it is primed and ready for the artist's hand.
The land is now a vast, empty canvas, stabilized and sweetened by the reeds. But it is still just a flat expanse of earth. It lacks a circulatory system. Before you can plant a single crop, before you can build a single farmhouse, you must give the polder its veins and arteries. You must impose a new, man-made geography upon it. You are about to draw a grid on the face of the earth, a network of ditches and canals that will define life in this polder for centuries to come. The process begins with the surveyors. They return, but this time their task is not just to map what exists, but to dictate what will be. Using ropes, chains, and sighting instruments, they lay out a perfectly straight geometric pattern. The core of the plan is a series of main drainage canals known as weteringen. These are the major arteries designed to collect water from the entire polder and carry it towards the windmills at the edge. They are wide and deep, dug with an almost obsessive precision, their banks sloped at a specific angle to prevent collapse. Then, branching off from these main canals at perfect right angles are the smaller ditches, the sloten. These are the capillaries of the system. They will divide the entire polder into a vast, uniform chessboard of rectangular plots. Each plot of land will be bordered on all four sides by a ditch. This is the fundamental, inescapable reality of polder life. Your property will be an island.
You are part of the army of diggers. The work is even more physically demanding than building the dike. The soil is now firm, which means it's harder to dig. You use specialized spades with long, narrow blades designed for cutting through the dense clay. You stand in a line with other men, a human digging machine. The first man cuts the sod, the next lifts it out, the next deepens the trench, and so on. The rhythm is relentless. Cut, lift, toss.
Cut, lift, toss. Your back and shoulders ache with a deep, permanent burn. Your hands are covered in blisters. The sheer scale of the digging is hard to comprehend. You are not just digging a few trenches, you are digging hundreds of miles of them. Every single property line, every single field boundary is a ditch that must be dug by hand. This obsessive grid making is a hallmark of the classic Dutch polder. It reflects a mindset that historians love to analyze, a deep-seated belief in order, rationality, and control. Nature, in its wild, meandering state, has been banished. In its place is a landscape born from a ruler and a right angle. A quirky historical detail emerges from this process. The polder is laid out in a specific unit of measurement, the morgen, which literally means morning. This was the amount of land that one man with a team of oxen could theoretically plow in a single morning. It was a unit of work, not just a unit of area. The rectangular plots, or kavels, were often made a standard size based on this principle, perhaps 30 morgen. Your entire world is being quantified and standardized.
Of course, the academic world has a quiet argument about the rigidity of this grid. While the classic image of a polder is one of perfect, unyielding geometry, some historical geographers argue that the reality on the ground was often messier. They point to polders where the lines curve slightly to follow the contours of an old creek bed, or where the grid is interrupted by a stubborn patch of sandy soil that wasn't worth farming. Was the grid an absolute ideology imposed on the land, or a pragmatic template that was adapted to local conditions? As you dig your perfectly straight ditch, occasionally having to work around a massive, half-buried tree stump from the old lake, you suspect the answer is somewhere in the middle. As the network of ditches grows, the landscape transforms again. It is no longer a blank slate. It is now a precise, intricate pattern, a vast piece of graph paper. The water in the new ditches glistens in the sun. The system is starting to work. Rain that falls on a field will now slowly percolate through the soil into the nearest ditch. From there, it will flow into the larger canal, and from the canal, it will be carried to the waiting windmills to be expelled from your world. You have created a permanent, built-in solution to the bathtub problem. You pause for a moment, leaning on your spade, and look at your handiwork. You have drawn lines on the mud. You have given it a structure, a logic. You can see the future farms, the future roads that will run alongside the main canals. You have created the blueprint for a new society. Every straight line you dig is a victory against the watery chaos that came before. The grid is drawn, the land is ready. Now the polder needs its people. But the first wave of inhabitants are not the proud farmers who will eventually own these plots. They are an army of laborers, a rough and transient workforce who live a life of immense hardship and profound monotony. You are one of them. You are a polderjongen, a polder boy. It's a name given to any man, young or old, who does this grueling work. Your home is not a cozy farmhouse. It is a temporary, hastily constructed shack built on the edge of the new polder, often using leftover materials from the dike and mill construction. It's a long, low barracks, cramped and drafty, which you share with dozens of other men. Your bed is a straw-filled mattress on a wooden bunk. There is no privacy, no comfort. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool, sweat, and cheap tobacco. Your life is stripped down to the bare essentials: work, eat, sleep, repeat. Your day starts before dawn. You're awoken by a foreman's shout, not a rooster's crow. A quick, meager breakfast, usually a hunk of dark rye bread and maybe some weak, lukewarm beer, which is safer to drink than the water, and then it's a long walk out into the polder to your assigned section. The work is whatever needs to be done that day. One week you might be part of a team fine-tuning the ditches, ensuring the water flows at the correct, gentle gradient.
Another week, you could be building the first rudimentary roads, laying down layers of sand and shells to create a passable surface.
The most common job, and the most soul-crushing, is finishing the land. This involves walking every square foot of a new plot, breaking up the large clods of earth with a heavy mallet, removing stubborn roots and rocks, and leveling the ground with a hand rake. It is mind-numbingly repetitive work, performed under the vast, empty sky. There is no shade, no shelter from the relentless wind or the sudden downpours. You work until your muscles scream and your mind goes numb. This is the hard, unromanticized truth of polder creation. It wasn't built by gentlemen farmers with grand visions. It was built on the backs of thousands of anonymous laborers like you. They came from all over the Low Countries and even further afield. Landless sons, out-of-work sailors, men fleeing debts or the law. The polder was a place of opportunity, but it was a harsh and unforgiving one. A little-known aspect of your life is the truck system. You are often not paid entirely in cash. A significant portion of your wages is paid in tokens or credit at a company store, the Keat, run by the polder's developers. Here you can buy your food, your tobacco, your tools, but the prices are inflated, ensuring that you are always in debt, always tied to the job. It's a system of indentured servitude, trapping you in a cycle of work and debt.
The social structure of the polder-making world is a topic of ongoing study for social historians. Was this highly organized, almost military-style labor force a precursor to later industrial workforces? Some scholars argue that the polder projects were, in essence, vast open-air factories, pioneering techniques of labor management and discipline that would become common in the Industrial Revolution. Others contend that the social dynamics were more complex, with informal networks of kinship and regional loyalty playing a significant role in how work was organized and how disputes were settled. The reality for you is that the foreman is king, and his word is law. At dusk, you trudge back to the barracks, your body aching, your clothes caked in mud. Dinner is a thin stew, perhaps with some salted fish if you're lucky. The evenings are short. There is little energy for recreation. Some men gamble with dice or cards, their faces grim in the flickering candlelight. Others sit in silence, staring into the fire, too exhausted to even speak. You collapse onto your straw mattress, the smell of the damp earth still in your nostrils, and fall into a heavy, dreamless sleep. You are not building a nation. You are not taming nature. You are simply trying to survive until the next sunrise, to earn enough to fill your belly one grueling, monotonous day at a time. You are the forgotten human engine of this great land-making machine. While you and the other polder young'uns toil in the mud, another figure stands apart, both literally and figuratively. This is the miller, the molinar. He lives a life that is, in its own way, just as demanding and monotonous as yours, but it is a life of solitude and immense responsibility. You are now that miller. You are the guardian of the polder, the solitary watchman on the wall. Your home is the windmill itself. You live with your family in the cramped, multi-level base of the stone or timber structure. It's a strange and noisy house. The rhythmic groaning and creaking of the mill's machinery is the constant soundtrack to your life. The walls vibrate gently when the mill is at work. You have learned to sleep through it, to read its language. A change in the pitch of the groan can tell you the wind is shifting. A new clacking sound might mean a gear tooth is wearing down. Your home is a living thing, and you are its caretaker. Your day is not governed by a foreman's shout, but by the sky. You are a student of the wind.
You wake before dawn, and your first act is to go outside and feel the air, to look at the clouds, to gauge the strength and direction of the breeze. Your entire livelihood and the safety of the polder below depends on your ability to read these subtle signs. You have to decide how much canvas to spread on the sails. Too little, and you won't pump enough water. Too much on a day with gusty winds, and the sails could be ripped to shreds. Or, in a worst-case scenario, the immense force could overheat the wooden brake and set the entire mill on fire.
This is the central historical reality of your job. You are a skilled technician, not just a laborer. You are part meteorologist, part engineer, part carpenter. Your hands are not just calloused from work, they are stained with the grease you use to lubricate the massive wooden gears. You know every beam, every peg, every cog in this complex machine. You can diagnose a problem from a faint, unfamiliar sound. One of the most obscure but critical parts of your job is dressing the millstones, if your mill also grinds grain. Even in a polder mill, this was a common secondary task. You would use a special hammer, a mill bill, to painstakingly chip furrows into the flat surface of the massive stones. The pattern of these furrows is a complex art, designed to shear the grain perfectly as the stones turn. It's incredibly precise work that sends tiny sharp splinters of stone flying. An old miller's lungs were often full of stone dust, a professional hazard that few people outside the trade ever considered. It's a quiet debate among medical historians whether the miller's cough was a recognized occupational disease of the era. You are a respected figure in the community, but also an isolated one. Your mill stands on the edge of the polder, away from the main settlement. Your nearest neighbors are the other millers in your gang, miles away across the flat expanse. You communicate with them using the silent language of the sails, signaling your status, coordinating your efforts. Your social life is limited. You are always on call. A sudden storm in the middle of the night means you are up on the narrow walkway of the mill's cap, wrestling with frozen ropes and canvas in the howling wind and rain, trying to tame the giant under your command.
It is a life of profound responsibility. If you fail, if you are lazy or incompetent, the consequences are dire. If you don't keep the water level in the polder low enough, the farmer's crops will be ruined. If your mill breaks down through neglect, the whole drainage system is compromised. The entire community depends on your vigilance. You are the beating heart of the polder's circulatory system, and the health of the entire body politic rests on your steady, reliable pulse. You stand on the gallery of your mill at sunset, looking out. On one side, you see the dark, threatening water of the Ring Canal, the water you have defeated. On the other, you see the neat, green grid of the polder, the land you are protecting. You see the distant lights of the new farmhouses starting to twinkle on. You are not a farmer. You are not a landowner, but this place is more yours than anyone's. You are its guardian, its protector, its lonely, silent sentry, forever listening to the secrets of the wind.
The polder is no longer a construction site. The laborers have moved on, the ditches are dug, and the first farmhouses now dot the impossibly flat landscape. The raw, muddy earth has been transformed into a patchwork of green pastures and budding fields. You are now a landowner, one of the original investors, or perhaps a tenant farmer who has leased one of the new, perfectly rectangular plots. You have your piece of the promised land, but you quickly learn that ownership here comes with a unique set of responsibilities. You don't just own the land, you're a part of a system governed by the waterschap, the water board. You receive a notice, delivered by a boy on a pony. There is to be a meeting of the water board. Attendance is not optional. This is the core democratic principle of the polder, born from absolute necessity. Because your neighbor's neglect of his ditches can flood your land, everyone must have a say, and everyone must be held accountable. You make your way to the meeting, held in a simple, purpose-built hall near the center of the polder. Inside, the room is filled with your fellow landowners. They are stern-faced men, practical, their faces weathered by the same wind that batters your own farm. At the head of the room sits the Dikgraaf and the other board members, the Heemraden. They are not lords or nobles. They are your peers, elected from among the landowners themselves.
The meeting begins. The air is tense. The first item on the agenda is the schouw, the annual inspection of the ditches. A board member reads from a ledger, a list of shame. He calls out the name of a farmer whose ditches were found to be clogged with weeds, or whose small section of the dike was showing signs of erosion from his cattle. The farmer in question stands up, his face red with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He offers excuses, a sick wife, a broken tool. The board listens, but they are unmoved. A fine is levied. It is harsh, but everyone in the room knows it is necessary. The integrity of the whole system depends on the diligence of each individual part. This is the mainstream function of the water board, maintenance and regulation. But the meeting soon turns to a more complex issue. A dispute has arisen between two sections of the polder. The farmers in the lower-lying western section claim that the farmers in the slightly higher eastern section are draining their land too aggressively, overwhelming the shared canals and causing water to back up onto the western fields. Now you witness the polder model in action. It's not a polite debate. It's a loud, passionate, and deeply technical argument. Men who spend their days in muddy fields suddenly transform into amateur hydrologists. They talk of flow rates, water pressure, and soil saturation. They unroll hand-drawn maps and point emphatically at different canals and sluices. There is shouting. There are accusations. But underlying it all is a shared understanding that a solution must be found. Failure is not an option, because failure means everyone gets wet feet.
A fascinating and often overlooked detail of these water boards is their legal power. In many parts of the Netherlands, the water boards were a separate and incredibly powerful form of government. They predated the state itself and could levy taxes, pass laws, and even, in some cases, administer justice for water crimes. Their authority was absolute within their domain. This is a point of quiet contention for legal historians. Was the Dutch state built around the water boards, or did the state eventually absorb these powerful independent bodies? The relationship was complex and evolved over centuries, a push and pull between central authority and the fierce local independence of the polder communities. After hours of heated debate, a compromise is hammered out. A new secondary ditch will be dug to relieve pressure on the main canal. The costs will be shared, with the eastern farmers paying a slightly higher portion. A vote is taken. Hands are raised. The motion passes. There is a collective release of tension in the room. The system has worked. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. You leave the meeting with a new understanding of your home. The polder is not just a place, it is a political entity. It is a constant, ongoing negotiation between individual rights and collective responsibility. You are not just a farmer. You are a citizen of a water-based republic. Your freedom to swing your arm, ending precisely where your neighbor's nose or his drainage ditch begins.
The feeling of communal resolve from the water board meeting lingers for a few weeks. The fined farmer sullenly clears his ditch. The new secondary canal is surveyed and the initial digging begins. Life settles into the rhythm of the seasons, a rhythm dictated by planting, tending, and the endless, low-level anxiety of keeping the water at bay. You begin to feel a sense of permanence, a fragile confidence in the lines you have drawn on the world. Then, one autumn afternoon, you notice the wind has changed. It's not just its direction, blowing from the northwest, the most dangerous quarter, it's the texture of it. It feels heavy, dense, and carries a distant briny smell that is stronger than usual. The sheep on the dike are restless, huddled together with their backs to the breeze. The gulls, which usually wheel and cry overhead, are flying low and inland, silent and purposeful. These are the old warnings, the unspoken language of the landscape that every polder dweller learns to read. By evening, the sky has turned a sickly yellow-gray. The wind no longer gusts, it moans, a low, continuous note that makes the small glass panes in your farmhouse window vibrate. The rain begins, not a gentle drizzle, but a hard, driving spray, as if the sea itself is being flung at your home. You perform the familiar rituals of the storm, bringing the last of the cattle into the barn, checking the latches on the shutters, securing anything loose in the yard. Every action is steeped in a kind of folk memory, a muscle memory passed down from generations who have faced this same threat. You think of the stories of the great floods, the St. Elizabeth's flute, or the Allerheiligen flute, All Saints' flood, catastrophic storm surges that swallowed entire districts and redrew the map of the country. This is the great unifying fear of your people, the historical trauma that underpins your entire existence.
In the middle of the night, you are woken by a new sound, deeper than the wind. It's the frantic ringing of a church bell from the main village. It's not a call to prayer, it is an alarm. The dike walked is being called. The storm surge has arrived. The tide in the North Sea, pushed by the relentless northwest wind, has swelled to a monstrous height, preventing the main rivers from discharging. That water is now backing up, pushing the level in your polder's ring canal higher and higher, placing an immense, unprecedented pressure on the new ring dike. You pull on your thickest wool cloak and your waterproofed leather boots and head out into the screaming darkness. The wind hits you like a physical blow, stealing the air from your lungs. You join a line of other men, all grim-faced, carrying lanterns that cast wild, dancing shadows. You make your way to your assigned section of the dike. The scene is one of controlled chaos. The waves on the ring canal, normally so placid, are now a churning mass of white-capped fury, crashing against the outer slope of the dike with a sound like thunder. The water is terrifyingly high, just a few feet from the crest. Your job is not to fight the waves, it is to walk, to watch, and to listen. You patrol your section, your boots sinking into the sodden turf. You're looking for the telltale signs of weakness. Not a dramatic crack, but something more subtle. A place where the grass seems unusually green and wet. A spot where the ground feels soft and spongy underfoot. You are listening for the sound of trickling water, a sound that should not exist. The most feared sign is a well, a small boil of water bubbling up on the polder side of the dike. It means the immense pressure is forcing a channel underneath the dike's foundation, a tiny wound that can quickly turn into a catastrophic breach.
Suddenly, a shout goes up from further down the line. A well has been spotted. You rush over. In the flickering lantern light, you see it. A small, muddy spring bubbling up at the base of the dike. It's the earth itself bleeding. Immediately, the emergency plan kicks in. Men arrive with emergency supplies that are always kept ready for this moment. This is a fascinating, if desperate, piece of folk engineering. They slap down a large, tarred piece of sailcloth over the boil, and then pile anything and everything they can on top of it. Sacks of clay, manure, sod, even their own bodies, to create a counterpressure, to try and staunch the flow. The psychological toll of living this way is a subject of quiet debate among historians. Did this constant existential threat create a culture of proactive resilience and tight-knit community, as most argue? Or did it, as others suggest, foster a deep-seated, collective anxiety,
a kind of national fatalism expressed in a rigid and pious society, always aware of its own fragility. As you stand there, soaked to the bone, pressing a shovelful of mud onto the patch, you feel both. You feel the powerful bond with the men beside you and the profound, cold terror of the water. For hours you work in the howling gale, patrolling, reinforcing, watching. And then, almost imperceptibly, the wind begins to lose its highest shriek. The rain softens from a torrent to a steady downpour. The peak of the storm surge has passed. The water in the canal stops rising. It has not breached the dike. You have held. As the gray, exhausted dawn breaks, you look at the battered but unbroken line of your dike. It's not a feeling of victory. It is a feeling of reprieve. You have survived this time. The water will be back. The fight is never over. In the gray, watery light of the morning after the storm, the polder is a scene of quiet devastation. Fields are flooded with standing rainwater. Fences are down, and the roads are impassable mires of mud. But the dike held. The core of your world is intact. The windmills, which had been stopped and secured during the worst of the gale, are now released. Their sails turn once more, slowly at first, then picking up speed in the brisk, clean wind. The sound of the scoop wheels begins again, that reassuring, rhythmic heartbeat of the polder. The slow, arduous process of pumping out the excess rainwater begins. Weeks pass, the land drains, the damage is repaired, the memory of the storm's terror begins to fade, replaced by the familiar routines of farm life. And as spring arrives, the true reward for all the hardship, all the risk, and all the back-breaking labor finally reveals itself. The transformation is breathtaking. You stand at the door of your farmhouse and look out. The land that was once a muddy, barren wasteland is now a carpet of the most vibrant, almost electric green you have ever seen. The soil, enriched by the centuries of sediment from the lake bed and the ash from the burnt reeds, is incredibly fertile. The grass in your pastures is thick, lush, and sweet. This is the great economic payoff, the historical driver behind the whole enterprise, creating prime grazing land. The damp, clay-rich soil of the polders is not ideal for growing grain, but it is absolutely perfect for growing grass. And where there is grass, there are cattle. Your small herd of black and white cows, the ancestors of the famous Frisian breed, are scattered across the pasture. They graze contentedly, their heads down, their bells making a gentle, intermittent music. They are growing fat and healthy on the rich grass. They are producing astounding quantities of milk. The air is no longer filled with the smell of mud and decay, but with the sweet, warm scent of livestock and clover. The polder becomes a dairy factory. The real wealth is not in the land itself, but in what the land produces. In the cool, stone-lined cellar of your farmhouse, your wife and daughters are at work. They are churning butter, a rich yellow butter that is prized in the crowded cities of Holland. They are making cheese, pressing the curds into large round molds. These wheels of cheese are the polder's gold. They can be stored for months, transported easily, and sold for a handsome profit in markets far away. A small but fascinating detail of this era is the specialization of cheese. Different regions of the Netherlands began to develop their own signature cheeses, like Gouda and Edam. This wasn't just about flavor, it was about branding and quality control. The cheese from your polder, stamped with the mark of your local dairy guild, becomes a symbol of reliability and excellence. This is the birth of a major Dutch export industry, an industry built entirely on reclaimed land, grass, and cows. The absolute, almost surreal flatness of the landscape has an unexpected side effect. The sky feels enormous,
dominant. The clouds, the sunsets, the subtle shifts of light, they all become a part of the landscape in a way they aren't in a hilly or forested country. This unique quality of light is often cited by art historians as a key influence on the Dutch Golden Age painters. Would the luminous, sky-filled landscapes of painters like Jacob van Ruysdael have existed without the polders? It's a classic chicken and egg debate in art history. Did the landscape create the art, or did the artists teach people how to see the beauty in this seemingly monotonous landscape? You lean against a fence post, chewing on a stalk of grass. The sound of the distant windmills is a soft, rhythmic whisper. The lowing of the cattle is a peaceful counterpoint. The ditches, once scars of raw earth, are now lined with reeds and wildflowers, their still water reflecting the vast, dramatic sky. The straight lines of the canals and roads give the world a sense of deep, calming order. You have taken a piece of the violent, chaotic sea and transformed it into this vision of pastoral peace. You have turned a windswept, watery wilderness into a productive, golden landscape of butter and cheese. You have not just built a farm, you have created a paradise, albeit a fragile one, perpetually defended by dikes and windmills. For the first time, looking out at the grazing cows and the endless green, you feel a profound sense of peace. You are home.
Life in the polder settles into a comfortable, prosperous routine. The cows get milked, the cheese gets made, the canals get dredged. The existential threat of the water is still there, a low hum of anxiety in the back of your mind, but the systems you have built are working. The dikes are strong, the mills are reliable, the water board is vigilant. The physical landscape is established. Now, a slower, more subtle transformation begins. The landscape starts to shape you. You are living in a world defined by straight lines. Your fields are perfect rectangles. The roads and canals run in unwavering parallels and perpendiculars. Your entire visual world is a grid. This is the central thesis that many cultural historians propose. This man-made, rationalized landscape began to instill a particular mindset, a polder mentality. It is a way of thinking that values order, practicality, and logic above all else. You see it in the way you plan your farm. There is no room for whimsical, meandering paths. The most efficient route is a straight line, and so all paths are straight. You plant your crops in neat, straight rows. You build your house and barn at a precise right angle to the road. This isn't just about aesthetics, it's about maximizing space and efficiency in a finite, man-made world. Messiness is a luxury you cannot afford.
This mindset extends to your social interactions. The water board has taught you the iron law of interdependency. Your well-being is inextricably linked to your neighbor's diligence. This fosters a culture that is intensely communal, but not necessarily warm and fuzzy. It's a pragmatic cooperation. You help your neighbor reinforce his section of the dike, not out of pure altruism, but because you know his failure will become your flood. This cultivates a society that is deeply collaborative, but also one that is keenly aware of rules, obligations, and the transgressions of others. There is a strong pressure to conform, to do your part, to not be the weak link in the chain. An interesting and somewhat contentious theory in sociology is that this polder mindset laid the groundwork for the rise of Dutch capitalism. The polder was, in essence, a massive, long-term investment project. It required huge amounts of capital, complex organization, and a rational, calculating approach to risk and reward. The skills learned in managing a water board, balancing budgets, enforcing contracts, planning for the future, were directly transferable to the world of commerce and finance.
Is it a coincidence that the nation that mastered the polder also created the world's first stock market and multinational corporations? The debate over the directness of this link is ongoing, but the correlation is tantalizing. You even see this love of order in the small details of your domestic life. In your farmhouse, everything has its place. The tools are hung in a neat row on the wall. The cheese molds are scrubbed and stacked in perfect order. Your wife's linen press is a marvel of geometric precision. This isn't just tidiness, it's a reflection of a world where control and order are the primary virtues, the only things that stand between you and the chaos of the water.
Here's a peculiar manifestation of this: the Dutch obsession with cleanliness. The stereotype of the Dutch housewife endlessly scrubbing her stoop has its roots in this period. In a damp, muddy country wrested from the sea, keeping the inside world clean and dry was a constant battle. Cleanliness became a moral virtue, a sign of a well-ordered, disciplined household. It was a way of demonstrating that you were in control of your small corner of the world. You sit at your sturdy wooden table, looking out the window at the perfectly straight canal. Your life is predictable, orderly, and prosperous. But you are also aware of a certain lack of spontaneity. The wildness of nature has been almost entirely erased. There are no mysterious forests to get lost in, no surprising hills to climb for a new perspective. Your world is safe, but it is also, in a way, tamed into submission. You have created a land of straight lines, and in doing so, you have begun to think in them, to live in them. The grid you imposed on the earth has, in turn, imposed its own quiet logic on your soul.
Generations pass. The polder matures. Your great-great-grandchildren now run the farm, and the stories of the first muddy steps and the great storms have passed into local legend. The windmills, the silent, hard-working giants that made it all possible, have become such a familiar part of the landscape that they are almost invisible, like trees or clouds. They are the pulse of the polder, a rhythm so constant it is no longer noticed. Then, one day, a new sound drifts across the flat land. It's a sound that doesn't belong here. It's not the whisper of the wind or the creaking of wood. It's a rhythmic, mechanical chuffing, a harsh, metallic panting, accompanied by a plume of dark, acrid smoke that stains the pure, wide sky. You walk to the edge of the polder, near the main ring canal, and you see it. It is a strange, squat brick building with a tall, slender chimney. From its side, a massive iron arm rises and falls with a steady, relentless power, driving a huge water pump. This is a steam engine. This is the beginning of the end for the Age of Wind. The Industrial Revolution has finally arrived in your quiet pastoral world. The steam-powered pumping station, the Stoomgemal, represents a profound technological shift. At first, it's just a novelty, a powerful but expensive experiment. The old millers scoff at it. They call it the smoke mill. It's ugly, it's noisy, and it stinks. It lacks the elegance, the quiet grace of a windmill.
But the steam engine has one overwhelming advantage. It is reliable. It does not depend on the wind. It can work on a perfectly still day when the windmills stand idle and useless while the water in the ditches slowly rises. It can work at full power during the height of a storm, when a miller would have to reef his sails or stop the mill entirely for safety. It is a brute, a tireless, unthinking beast of iron and fire that can be turned on and off with the pull of a lever. This marks a major turning point in Dutch water management, a historical fact as significant as the invention of the mill gang. With steam power, even deeper lakes could be drained, projects that would have been unthinkable with wind power alone. The great Haarlemmer Lake, a vast inland sea, was famously drained in the mid-19th century using massive steam engines, an engineering feat that captured the imagination of the world. The arrival of steam power creates a fascinating and somewhat sad transition period. For a few decades, the two technologies coexist. The windmills handle the day-to-day drainage, while the steam pump is fired up during emergencies or when the wind fails. But the economic logic is relentless. A single steam pump can do the work of a dozen windmills. It requires fewer skilled operators. As the old windmills age and fall into disrepair, they're often not replaced. It is cheaper to let them rot and rely on the new iron giant.
A quiet academic debate surrounds the social impact of this transition. Some historians argue that the shift from wind to steam represented a loss of local autonomy. The miller was an independent, skilled artisan, the master of his own machine. The steam engine operator was an employee, a wage laborer, part of a more centralized industrial system. The power, both literally and figuratively, was being consolidated. Others argue that this is a romanticized view, and that steam power liberated the polder communities from the tyranny of the weather, providing a level of security and prosperity never before possible. You watch as, one by one, the windmills in your polder fall silent. Their great sails are stripped of their canvas, leaving them like skeletons reaching for the sky. The miller, his ancient craft now obsolete, retires or finds other work. His lonely house in the mill becomes a curiosity, a relic. The rhythmic creaking that was the soundtrack of the polder for centuries is replaced by the distant, monotonous chuffing of the steam pump. You feel a sense of profound loss, a nostalgia for the quiet, elegant giants. They were more than just machines. They were characters, each with its own name and personality. They were partners in the great struggle against the water. The new steam pump is efficient, yes, but it has no soul. It doesn't speak the language of the wind. It doesn't announce births and deaths with the position of its sails. It just works. The age of wind and wood is giving way to the age of coal and iron. Your world is becoming safer, more efficient, and perhaps a little less magical.
The chuffing of the steam engine fades into the mists of history. The plume of coal smoke dissipates and is replaced by the contrails of airplanes. The lonely sound of a single cart on the shell road gives way to the gentle, continuous whisper of rubber tires on smooth asphalt. You are still in the polder, but centuries have passed in the blink of an eye. You are here, now. You stand on the side of a modern road, looking out at the same landscape, yet it is utterly transformed. The grid is still there, a testament to the vision of your ancestors, but it is now overlaid with the infrastructure of a new millennium. Gleaming, high-tech dairy farms with robotic milking machines have replaced the simple barns. Sleek, silent electric cars glide along roads that were once muddy tracks. A high-speed train hums past in the distance, a silver streak against the green, connecting cities that were once a week's journey apart. In the distance, you can see the lights of Schiphol Airport, one of the busiest hubs in the world, where massive jets land and take off from runways built on the very bottom of the Great Haarlemmer Lake, a place drained by the iron giants that replaced the windmills. This is the ultimate polder, a place where you can check your email while standing 10 feet below what should be the sea. As you walk, you notice something strange about the oldest farmhouses, the ones dating back a century or two. Their front doors seem too high. You have to step up to get to them, which seems backward. This reveals the final, quiet, and deeply ironic secret of the polder. The land is sinking. This is the obscure but crucial scientific fact of your modern existence here. The peat in the soil, once stabilized, continued to be exposed to air. And when peat meets oxygen, it slowly, relentlessly oxidizes and compacts. The very act of draining the land to make it safe set in motion a geological process that causes it to sink, a few millimeters every year. For centuries, the ground has been slowly, imperceptibly subsiding around the old buildings, which were built on deeper, more stable foundations. You are in a constant slow-motion race to the bottom.
This leads to the great, quiet, and urgent debate of our time, a topic discussed in the halls of government in The Hague and in engineering departments at Delft. As the polder sinks and the sea levels of the world rise due to climate change, is the old system sustainable? The Dutch are now fighting a war on two fronts, against the water outside their walls and against the sinking ground beneath their feet. Can you just keep building the dikes higher, installing ever more powerful pumps? Or is a radical new approach needed? Some futurists and environmental engineers propose a managed retreat, a concept called depoldering, strategically giving some of the land back to the water, creating buffer zones and new wetlands to work with nature instead of perpetually fighting it. To a people who have spent 1,000 years creating land, the idea of intentionally flooding it is a profound, almost unthinkable heresy. Yet, the debate is real, and it is happening now. But you push those future anxieties aside for a moment. You just stand here, in the heart of the polder, the wind still sweeping across the flat land as it always has. You look at the neat fields, the placid canals, the distant preserved windmills that now stand as beloved monuments to a bygone era. You can feel the immense depth of time beneath your feet. You are standing on layers of history, the modern pavement, the 19th century clay, the 15th century reed beds, the medieval mud, and beneath it all, the silent sandy bottom of a primeval lake. You are standing on a monument not to a king or a battle, but to 1,000 years of stubborn, patient, collective effort. A monument made of mud, water, and wind.
And now, the story itself begins to recede. The clamor of the waterboard meeting, the rhythmic chuffing of the steam engine, the frantic ringing of the storm bell, they all grow faint, fading into a gentle murmur on the very edge of your hearing. The sharp, straight lines of the polder begin to soften and blur, its perfect grid dissolving into the gentle, rolling green of a dreamscape, vast and peaceful beneath an endless sky. Your own mind begins to drift, letting go of facts and dates, letting go of the struggle. The great sails of the windmills turn now in a slow, silent ballet, not fighting the wind, but dancing with it. The scoop wheels turn with a quiet, easy grace, no longer lifting water, but simply tracing soothing circles in the calm, deep waters of your sleep. Your breathing finds its own rhythm, slow and steady, like the tide receding from a quiet shore, carrying with it the thoughts and worries of the day, leaving behind only the smooth, clean sand of tranquility. There is nothing left to build, nothing left to defend. The dikes are holding. The fields are at peace. You can feel the gentle weight of your blanket, a safe and comforting dike against the cold of the night. There is only the soft darkness around you, the gentle hum of a distant fan, and the quiet, deep promise of rest. Sleep now. The work is done. The dikes will hold.